So I endeavoured to go live on Facebook, but apparently that isn't allowed without you, Lloyd.
Well, I actually didn't even want to be here. I just wanted to annoy you, and
Yeah,
now
and now you're paying the price. You
pressed
have
into service.
to now. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, welcome for those of you watching live, and for those of you not watching live, I suppose. Welcome to Performance Check. I'm joined with by Jarl DM Lloyd. I don't know where this is going. Earlier, I posted into the community group. If you're watching this and you don't know about it, Absolute Tabletop on Facebook, go over there to the official group because that's where we have a lot of our conversations. I went live to talk about this DM mentor thing that has been going around. And I've said what I need to say about that matter. Really, unless you have any thoughts to add to it, Lloyd?
Nope, figure it out yourself. Overall, that's what I said yesterday. I streamed about it. Yep, I think it's nice to encourage people and to help them if they need help. But I had no mentor, nor did you, nor did most people. I think you just have to do it yourself. And I don't think there's any amount of encouragement that will, if you haven't run a game yet, and I don't think there's any amount of encouragement of people saying, like, you can do it, is going to change that. Like,
Exactly.
you're going to do it or you're not, you know?
And if you don't want to run a game and you're not feeling confident about running a game, then play in a game and then see how easy it is to run a game and then run a game. But anyway, in regards to the other, the positive of this is that it is still, helping. Like I said before, like it's not a negative thing. It's just, being available to help if it's asked for. I put out into the community. I posted a thread saying, if there's anything that you'd like help with, let's create some stuff together. Let's work out some shit. So I got quite a nice response, which was cool. So I'm going to begin with Mac DeCane, I believe his name is, or DeChaney. I could be saying that wrong, but it's a badass name either way.
Yes,
it's a really good name. Mac says, I like it. I need help with creating atmosphere with NPCs that are generic without having them feel pointless. Do you have any thoughts about that, Lloyd?
What's a generic NPC? Like just not important NPCs? Do you think?
I guess I need help with creating atmosphere with NPCs that are generic. Well, I suppose my point to that would be is you don't need to create too much atmosphere if they're like I don't know, like it depends really. It all depends on the kind of mood you want to get across, I suppose. Important NPCs, my advice would be to keep them to a minimum. I think if you have only like a few really important NPCs, you can really focus on sort of fleshing them out and giving them sort of good motivation and making them feel like they're three-dimensional beings. I think with generic NPCs, I think they are more of a service to the surroundings. So if they're in a creepy town, then obviously lots of people are going to be really backward and strange and peculiar. So I would say align generic NPCs with the kind of mood that you're trying to come across. If they're in a friendly town, then obviously everyone's going to be delightful. And that will then help in creating that atmosphere with the NPCs. I don't know. Is that too broad, Lloyd?
No, I think that makes sense. I'm trying to think of an example, but yeah, like if you're coming to, the town of Goodleyton, like this lovely little place that has a little river running through it or whatever, people there are going to be like, oh, hello, adventurer. Welcome to our town. We have everything nice here. We sure have a nice blacksmith who will like make, like all that boring shit. Or if you're in Innsmouth, like the famous town from then all the people have like weird look about them and they all kind of like congregate in the shadows and they're all like talking and whispering and looking at you and stuff. Like that can work as well. I think most NPCs are window dressing.
I agree.
I might have, like you say, like 3 or 4 NPCs in a campaign that are important and the rest are not.
Yeah, and I think if you just by accident happen to create a generic NPC that people latch onto, you'll find that players will attach things to those NPCs that they respond to. So if they like the barkeep or if they like the blacksmith, they'll want to know more about them, and then you can kind of just sort of build from there. So the players, in a sense, will tell you which NPCs that you know are going beyond generic, because then they become a character in their own right. But
one of the most beloved NPCs in my home game, we were playing Star Wars, and one of their first missions was just like to bring this Trandoshan man like from one corner of the galaxy to the other. You just paid them. He was very polite, but he had this way of speaking. I just like initially when he was a Trandoshan, a lizard, and so he was like, "Hello, I want to go across the galaxy," and they were like, "Yeah, that's fine." So that became this thing that he's just like very polite, but has this weird way of speaking. And I told them his name in the first session, and they forgot. And then they didn't bring him anywhere. They just like went on all their own missions and left him in the ship for months and forgot his name. And so this thing became a thing where they were like always trying to get him to tell them what his name was without being rude about it. Just one of those things where like an NPC who's not important becomes very important because players latch onto him, you know?
Yeah, I'm completely with you there, man. And that's a really good example. Excellent. So yeah, and in terms of without them feeling pointless is the last point that you make, Mac. Some of them, like Lloyd say, are kind of like window dressing, really. Not every single one of them are going to have backstories and meanings for being where they need to be. They'll be so I don't think you need to worry about them being pointless. Like if all of the NPCs have a role in the town, that's quite helpful. People that work in, I don't know, the shop, there's always a shop or a tavern, you know, then they're not pointless. They have a role to fulfill. And then anything beyond that, like I think the players will will show you if they're interested in someone, then you can develop them further. To be honest, like I think it's just about allowing whatever you're doing to inform how those NPCs come across, if that makes any sense. So I hope that helps, Mac. Nicholas says, at the moment, in counterbalance, if I follow the laid out rules, it's just so easy for the characters to overcome the challenges. If I custom make it by rule of cool, they have a 60-40 chance of TPK. Okay, so the heart of this question is essentially in counterbalance then, Lloyd.
I am morally opposed to balancing encounters. I decide what's going to be in the encounter and then I put it in the game. I don't think you need to balance your encounters. I think that if it's too strong, the players should realize that and flee. And if it's not, then they should win or maybe lose, you know, like it would happen in reality. What I do generally compared to the monsters in D&D is that I take about 25 of the hit points away, 25% of their hit points away, and I increase their damage. So everything does more damage and has less health. I've said this a few times before, but I think there's really only 5 rounds of combat before combat starts feeling incredibly boring. And 5 is pushing it even, I think. So you want to have your combats be like, oh shit, and then done, you know? Even the big combats that I've run, like recently we had that one in Against the Shadow with, there was like 20 orcs and stuff. That wasn't more than 5 rounds, you know? So you want to keep them punchy. Less health, more damage would be my give.
Absolutely. And then when it comes to even bigger fights, so if you're going for like a clash of, you know, mass combat, essentially, I believe it actually kind of transcends you keep the round system in place, but you obviously then center your session around that. So you tell different moments that are happening and you have breaks in rounds of combat because then something else develops in the battle and such. But I know that isn't your question, but in terms of balance itself, I agree. Don't worry so much about balance. I think to make it challenging for if you're finding that your characters are overcoming things too easily, then absolutely start having to play with what the numbers that you're writing down. You know, give them a bit more AC, give them a bit more clout to their attacks. Maybe not more HP, because then that'll make the it last longer. But I mean, maybe that's the kind of game that you like running, and that's totally cool too. Jeff Doty, our good friend, the man in the sky. I don't know why I called him that. That's really weird. Why have I called him the man in the sky?
The man in the sky.
I don't know. No, I tell you why. I tell you why it is, because I always say to Jeff, "Oh, you've had like this meteoric rise throughout the community."
Okay.
That's why, and I don't know why, but my brain went to man in the sky. I'm not saying that Jeff Doty is a deity as of yet, but you could add a few letters to his name and he would be Jeff Deity.
Yep.
Anyway, he says, GM narration style. Is it something you've consciously moved towards and chosen, or is it just a natural way that you have a tendency towards? Either way, are there any specific things you do to improve or practice your narrations? Who or what have been impactful influences and inspirations to your style? Do you want to take that first, Lloyd?
Yep. I haven't worked towards it. I haven't done anything conscious. I guess I pick up things from playing in games more than I don't really watch many games. I don't tend to watch live plays, but I do pick up things from other GMs that I play games with. So if I'm in their game, impactful influences. Andrew Knapp and Nick Dawson both have had major impacts on the way that I run my game. And Ian Christensen. That's like when I first started playing. Andrew Knapp and Ian Christensen, they ran lots of games for me, and that formed my initial idea of what a game's supposed to look like. But then I went very, very narrative for a long time. I was into Fate and stuff like that, and then I played in a few Nick Dawson games, and I was like, oh yes, it's about misery. And then I like made a swift turn towards mechanics again, and like letting the dice fall where they may, and you know, that has continued in that direction until I am who I am now. I would just say play with as many GMs as you can, and if you can't play with lots of GMs, then watch GMs and get an impression of what other people do.
So what you're saying is, Lloyd, you just play in lots of games.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yep.
I second that opinion, but I won't cop out. I'll add something to it. So I completely agree with Lloyd. Like you take what you like from other people that you either see running the game, if you watch live plays, or if you're playing it in games. That's the best way to do it. In terms of the way that I narrate or tell stories, there are obviously a lot of influences. In terms of actual like storytelling examples, well, the examples are obvious, like with films and TV and stuff, but I say that quite a lot, so I'm going to actually give you another example. And this is actually to do with someone just telling a story without any aid, without it being a film, without it being TV or anything. Someone literally just looking to a camera and telling you a story. Is either comedians. I think comedians, like, I know that may sound a bit strange, but like the way that they layer storytelling is very, very important. There are punches to the stories that they tell. And also, there's a very specific example I can give to you. There is a screenwriter by the name of Max Landis. If you go into YouTube and type Max Landis Superman Lives, or Death and Rebirth of Superman, there is one where he acts out the story with his friends, but there's another one where he basically pitches to the camera what he would do if he was given a Justice League film, and he actually tells the story, and he doesn't have anything behind him or anything. He's just looking at the camera and he tells the story, and the energy that he gives and the way that he speaks about action scenes and about dramatic reveals, he does it in such a way that he tells it like it were a film. I really like the way he tells stories, so I would say that I've taken on board like a few things that he did in terms of actually hitting home the important elements of storytelling. And also he's really good at sort of slick storytelling. Like, he gets to the point. Like, he doesn't like wait around for too long. The only time that he'll go into like vast descriptions is when he's setting a mood or a tone. So that's something I can definitely say I took on board from him. But to be honest with you, like, for the most part with Lloyd as well, like it's just from games that I've been involved in. I've seen people set the scene in really cool ways, and I've borrowed that, and I've developed my own style as well. So I've given you a recommendation. Go and check out Max Landis. He's great and a pretty great writer, and he tells a good story.
But how come all of his films are flops?
I know, it's so weird, right? You know what I mean, though? You've seen that video, right? Where he told
Yeah. No, I've seen him on Red Letter Media a couple of times, and
yeah, they love it. It's like they talk about his stuff and they rip him to shreds.
Yeah, they do ruin him.
They ruin everyone. I love Red Letter Media. Best thing on the internet, in my opinion. Gavin Walter says, I need help getting into the mind of my NPCs so that they say believable things and come to life. They say believable things and come to life. Lloyd, I ranted for a while. You go.
The cheat code for NPCs is to pick a person that you know in real life and then be them. I think that's like the easiest way to make this person be believable. I don't do it often because I don't play. I think it's easier in modern settings to make people believable. People in the games that I run don't talk like normal people, unfortunately. But I think that's a really easy way to kind of think about it. If you just think about a person you know that the players don't know, and then try and like take on some of their mannerisms, that's an easy way to do it. Like everyone has a way of talking. You know, copy that.
Yeah, and I think in terms of believability, like, I mean, you can sort of push the boat out with believability because most of the time you're involved in settings, either fantasy or sci-fi, where something that they're talking about doesn't necessarily have to be believable. It just has to be convincing. I think that's the line you have to draw. And I think things are convincing when people are invested. So I would say if you have a particular NPC that you want to make more convincing, pick an emotion. I'd say, like, I try not to sort of reference my own stuff too much because people might not have seen it. But to give you an example, I pick one kind of idea that I want the NPC to come across as. Weaver from Lawkeepers, I would say damaged. And sort of think about that when he's talking to people. Like he used to be this one thing and now he's something else. So every time he's speaking with people, he has kind of like a sort of bitter, but sort of almost also hopeful kind of countenance when he's speaking to the player characters. And it's just remembering that when talking to the players that it will come across. I'm not saying like really ham it up because that will come across in maybe not such a great way. But if you remember that yourself, and like Lloyd was saying, like consider speaking in a way that people, you know, like someone that you know, for example, or a character from a TV show, then yeah, that's a really good way of doing it. And Drake actually made a very good point in there as well, actually. And he says, how do you get yourself into the right state of mind as a player? It is kind of the same thing, I suppose. So think about like your player characters as well in the same regard, you know, and yeah, all will become clear. Taylor says, do you have an idea of where you want a campaign to go? Big picture, how much of an idea? Go for it.
Nope. I don't, mostly. Like the Saga campaign, I don't have an idea where I wanted to go. I have an idea where it could go. But I have more and more, I used to have a really strong idea what I want my campaigns to look like, but now more and more it's reactive and sandboxy and it's less narratively planned. So I don't really have, an idea of where I wanted to go.
The thing that I definitely do plan ahead with some of mine, but the thing that I like to ensure is not so much about campaign developments in terms of like how the story goes, because that should be down to the decisions of players and things. But I like ensuring that what lies ahead, the big picture, as it were, is something tonal. It's something thematic. So it doesn't really matter so much what they're doing because I can make sure that like I'm in charge of making sure that those themes are touched upon in the encounters that they face. But how they go about it is up to them. So that would be the only thing that I'd say, really. And I don't know. Like, does that make sense? Is that crazy?
Yeah, it does. I think there's lots of people. There's lots of advice given to people that you should like plan a campaign arc, or that you should like plan a campaign. I know that when I first got into this, that I was like, how could people possibly do a campaign? How can you plan all that stuff? Lots of ideas that people are like, have like folders and like, you know, there's like what the fuck is it called? Like notes and stuff all over the computer, and like storyboards and shit like that. And I just think that that's not so helpful. Even if you are new, I think it's better to avoid planning too much, because the players are going to wreck your plans. So just try and not think about it too much. It's like not helpful advice, but that's the advice.
No, it's fair enough. You know? I think it's saving people time, to be honest. Like, you can't cover all the bases. I mean, I'll admit, like, there are things that I want to happen. For instance, I really hoped that Barker's character was going to be around to learn the truth about Equinox, because it then changed what he knew about something to do with his backstory. So the things that I really would like to happen, and I think, oh, this would be cool, and I push it into the campaign. You know, but that's just me introducing a new element into an already existing situation. So I don't know. Let me see. Ben Buckner says, I see you've already been talking about this, Lloyd. I'm struggling with NPC motivations and reactions to PC actions and player enjoyment. The PCs have enraged a powerful noble, and I don't see why he wouldn't hire assassins or even attempt to kill them himself. I know this probably isn't a concern for most, but I don't think that players would respond well to a TPK if it happened, especially from his character. Now, I understand that you both have been having a talk in the comment section about this, Lloyd, but I thought it's a good topic to bring up anyway for people watching. So, yeah, talk about this, man.
So one of the pillars of my setting is consequences. I think it's really important that there are consequences to all the actions that you take as players, and that if there's not consequences to, like, the example here is that the players basically went and pissed off this very powerful person for no reason that I can understand. They just seem to like not like him, and they like really fucked with him, like majorly, for a long time, like partly ruined his life. And this person is very powerful. Like, if your players are doing that, why are they doing that? And if they are doing that and then are going to be whinging when there's like repercussions, then let them whinge. Like, this man is powerful, this noble. Why would he not use everything at his disposal to like get them back? So I suggested a couple of things that he could do that aren't straight up killing them, although that's what I think he would do. But it was things like just make their life hell. You know, so everywhere they go, all the shops won't serve them. All of the guards everywhere stop them and search them. They can't get into an inn anywhere. All the rooms are taken, but you know they're not. So just make their life hell, and then he would demand them to come to him and like kneel and apologize in public or something. Maybe that would be enough. But if I was that noble, I would kill them. You know.
It sounds like, to be honest, I think it was Ben asked the question. Yeah, like, to be honest, that just seems to me like an opportunity for fun. Like, I love poking my players. Like, there's something really like, if they're going to poke your NPCs, don't be afraid to poke back. You know, like, because it's real life. Like Lloyd was saying, like, it's just like real life. You know, if you piss someone off, they're gonna react in certain ways, and if that certain person has power, absolutely start using that influence that he has over society to mess with them. Another example. I'm going to demand that all of the loot that you get from your adventuring ways, I want 10% of it now.
Yeah.
As a way of reparations for the way that you've treated me. I think this is very fair. You've been operating in the society that I control. You know. Yeah. And then you're hitting them where their money is. They won't like that. Like, so test them. And if it sounds to me like that's a good way of building up tension. You have a villain, but a believable villain, because he has motivation. He's been spurned. Like, this sounds like a really good opportunity to me. Like, it sounds like a great opportunity for the game.
There's one thing that players hate most. It's being humbled, I think. You know, like players, you know, because the way that D&D works is that you're on a constant upward sort of until you become a god, basically, right? So you're decent, and then you're powerful, then you're so powerful, and then you're God. And so at any stage there, if you have to like go down on the scale again and have to like apologize to some noble in public, that's humiliating, and players will lose their mind more over that, I would say, than a TPK. So it's a good way to get them back, and I think there's real, like you said, really good fuel here for a proper villain.
Yeah, man, and it's not even like he would be like an evil person, but like he's been spurned and he has all the ammunition he requires to take the fight to them. So don't worry so much about the TPK. Just if you want him to hire assassins to go after them, do it.
Yeah.
It just sounds fun. It sounds really fun. I wish in fact, do you know what, Ben? Why don't you let us know how that goes? Use that. I mean, you might not decide to take this advice, which is totally fine. But if you do decide to go forward with that, please let us know what happens, because I'm intrigued to see how they'd react to that NPC finally saying, no, enough is enough. Kristen Logie says, part of my issue is continually thinking ahead for my games. I like running things with in-depth plots. I want my players to theorize and ponder about where the big mystery is leading, but it is mentally exhausting for me to come up with stuff 3 sessions ahead of time. So, you want to take this first?
I have no input on this because it's not at all how I do my games. When I ran a game early on in my career and then had a very complicated puzzle in it, and it was a nightmare. Both to run and for the players. We spent an hour trying to figure out that puzzle, and it was no good. If that's the kind of game you like to run that has lots of twists and turns and secrets and stuff like that, then you're going to have to think up stuff ahead of time. You don't have to do that, but if that's the kind of game you want to run, it's going to be more work, I guess, is the only answer that I can give.
This may seem like a bit of a cheat, but I mean, I quite like having a mystery there. But to be honest, I work that out at the very beginning and just leave little bits of story that they can come across that starts to unravel that mystery more. I don't mean like they're trying to solve a problem, though. I don't really do puzzles as such. I just do events that have transpired that players don't know about and then find out as they play through the game. So that's the way that I kind of do things. Like that. I know what he means with like in-depth plots and things like that. But to be honest with you, Kristen, if it's going to be completely dependent on what they're discovering to unravel the mystery, then I would say try not planning 3 sessions ahead of time, and just plan 1 session at a time and just see how it goes. I think because like we said before, you can't cover where they're gonna go next or whatever. You can't control or dictate their actions. So wait to see what leads they pick up on, and then think to yourself, well, how is that going to affect the big picture that you've already thought of? If you're running the sort of like this in-depth mystery, I'm sure you know the outcome that you would like to have the players discover. So just see where they go with it and think about, well, how can this lead to the big reveal? So yeah, 1 session ahead, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, plenty.
And that is it for those questions in the Facebook. So I'm just going to see if there's any in the chat, but I don't think there are. Oh no, there are. There's quite a few people talking actually. I don't know if there's any questions in here though, apart from Jeff Doty asking the man in the sky.
You have Philip ask a question.
Go ahead.
For a one-shot, when do you let the PCs go into detail on a potential sidetrack as opposed to moving them along? And how do you move them along without making it ham-fisted? That's a good question.
It is. I mean, if they're enjoying the sidetrack and they then and there's potential there for like, really like a cool encounter perhaps, or there's NPCs that they've sort of taken a shine to that you didn't think they would, then I'd say jump upon it. Like don't move them along. If there is like a story that you wish to achieve, then just wait till they stumble across it, maybe. I mean, I know some people like momentum in their games, and that it is tricky. It is tricky because it depends what you're running. Like if you're running like a really sort of like it's difficult, isn't it? It is difficult.
It is a hard one. I think like one shot to me is much harder to run than a campaign, because a one shot is
it's a one shot,
yeah, it's like contained and tight. So I don't know how many opportunities there need to be for sidetracks in a one shot. It depends, obviously. So one shot is so vague. You could be running a one shot that's set in a room, or like on one spaceship, if you wanted to, and there's not really much room for sidetrack in those places. Or you could do one which is them traveling the breadth of Mirkwood, and like there's so much space there. I would say that like make the quest clear or like the goal clear, and just remind them of it if you think it's starting to get dry or boring, like if they're on the sidetrack and they're having, like you said, having a great time and there's really good RP happening and stuff, like just let it flow. And if it starts to get a bit shit, you can just be like, remember that quest, guys,
Yeah. And also, I mean, we're thinking about one shots as in them being played online, but like I've been involved with one shots where you would take a day, you would hang out at a mate's and play D&D all day, it would be a one shot, but you just have like the majority of the day to play through it. So it depends on the timings as well that you're working with. If you're playing online and you just want it to be like a couple of hours, then you're absolutely like hammer home. This is the mission that needs to be achieved. But if you've got a little bit more time to play with, then yeah, I don't see the harm in letting them look at the scenery on the way, as it were.
Most of my campaign sessions are prepped right after the previous sessions or even during the current session. I rarely get too far ahead of the next session when I'm planning campaigns, but that's not a question. How do you keep track of enemy hit points and conditions and everything during a battle when running an online game different than at the table?
For me, it isn't different at all. I scribble down the notes, and what I do is if I have, say, for instance, the players are fighting 4 orcs, okay, I put in a table alongside their roughly written out attacks and stuff and armor class and stuff. I put a number 1, a number 2, a number 3, and a number 4. And any damage that they accrue, I just put the actual number of the damage into the table under their number. Okay, so if orc number 1 gets hits with 16 points of damage, I write a 16 under there. Because I find my mind works, I find it easier to add up than I do to subtract. So as soon as that total reaches their HP, then they're dead. Like it's just a quick way of keeping track of it.
That's funny. I do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's just easier. And you're like, right, that's definitely gone over the total. Then
yeah,
dead. Like that's the way I do it. I'm not really great at maths, but like that's one way that I worked out a long time ago is the best way for me to do it.
One thing that I do that I think is useful is naming bad guys as opposed to having So as opposed to having 15 orcs or 10 bandits, you have 10 bandits, but they all have names. And even if those names are like Fred, Tom, Jake, or whatever, like that's one thing. But like what you can do in lots of settings, particularly settings that are fantasy, is give them names about their appearance or about their weapon. So you might have Rob the Rogue and and like Big Fat Tom or whatever, like and like then it's easy for you first of all to picture where they are if you're using theater of the mind, which is I think most people do, to picture where they are on the battlefield because you have a description of each person in their name. And secondly, I think that's the main thing. It's easier to remember where they are and who's getting damaged, because I attack that orc is not as clear as I attack Big Fat Tom, Poor Tom.
poor Tom, man. Yeah, but that's a great way of looking at it, man. And yeah, the NPC, the enemy names are really effective as well. I really like that you've done that. You do that, and I should probably do that some more with my generic characters in fights and stuff. So Jeff Doty says I have ideas if a bit ways a campaign could go, but nothing is set in stone until it happens. Yeah, spot on. Walking DM says, agreed, settings need to have real teeth, otherwise complete chaos and chuckle fuckery reign supreme. Lloyd pulling a straight Patrick Phosphorus up in that campaign. I've only read the first one of it, Name of the Wind, so I don't know if that's a reference to anything. And then the Walking DM continues with a question. Aside from giving PCs a sense of responsibility for an NPC, is there any other way to make an NPC well-being important? Aside from giving PCs a sense of responsibility for an NPC, is there any other way to make an NPC's well-being important? So getting people to invest in them and making them feel important. I think for me, like there can be an emotional connection. If you actually make the players like them, that helps. There can also be a necessity to them as well. Perhaps that NPC has vital information that the player characters will need, and if they die, then that's another way of ensuring that they stay alive, and it's important that they stay alive. Is there a particular way that you make people feel responsible for NPCs in Isclough, Lloyd, considering how dangerous and brutal it can be sometimes?
So I guess two things. One, make the NPCs likable if you want them to stick around. That doesn't mean that they like the PCs, but make them likable. One of like a memorable NPC that I had in a game fairly recently. So the players were in Isclough, they went to go hunt a dragon, and the Jotnet went with them, which is like a half giant. He didn't speak once in the whole adventure. He just did a lot of like pointing and grunting. And he was like very likable, and they all kind of like feared and liked him. I think that's like a good way to do it. Make the NPC memorable and likable, and the players will stick to them. Other than that, make them useful. Like no one wants to carry dead weight around. So if you have like somebody who's effective, then they want to keep them around as well. I would say.
Good stuff. Great stuff. Philip Maddy says, great advice. Thank you. Will Fanazzo says, what's a good way to start DMing? Should I start with a one-shot or just a short campaign? I've been trying to for a really long time. I just haven't been able to think of a good way. I started DMing, and I always did campaigns. I never did one-shots. One-shots are a relatively new thing to me, really. The first things I ran were D&D and Star Wars games, and they were all campaigns. I don't know if that'll help you, but I mean, for me, I feel having consistent characters that you're sort of getting to used to how they work, like what the fight is going to do, so it will you'll get used to the player mechanic side of things, because it's the same examples being given to you again and again. I think that's the bonus of starting up with a campaign. But there are things to be said about one shots as well. Like you can test things out, see what flavors you enjoy in terms of the games that are out there. I don't know. What do you think, Lloyd?
I would say one shot is less work and less of a commitment. Like if you're going to be playing online with people, I would definitely say do one shots first. If you start a campaign with a bunch of people and you find out after session 3 you don't like 2 of them, or you cannot tolerate being around one of them, or whatever, you're kind of up shit's creek without a paddle.
That's true.
I do agree that I think campaigns are probably a really good way to learn. But I would say for your first ever game, maybe run a module, like run Last Minds of Phandelver or something like that for D&D. They're like pretty good, and they give you all the stuff you need to get started. Like Phandelver is particularly good, I think, as like an introductory thing. I would maybe just try and run a module, just run something, get it under your belt, and then when you've done that, you can kind of decide what you want to do after.
Yeah, that's really great advice, actually. The modules are there for that very reason. And yeah, that's and it's all laid out there in front of you, so then you can see how a campaign should kind of operate, even if it's like your basic D&D sort of modular campaign. Yeah, that's really good advice. Really good advice. Which I'm just thinking about it, actually, because the first thing I did was come online and do a campaign. I could have been screwed.
Yeah, you could have, yeah.
You could have been awful, Lloyd.
That could have been the worst.
You could have been the worst, man. No, I did my
You got very lucky. You did research, yeah.
I did my homework. Jeff Doty The Man in the Sky. I'm just gonna call it the Man in the Sky now. That's gonna stick.
Starman.
Waiting in the sky. He says, speaking of getting tips from others versus finding your own style, is there anything you have as part of your style that goes against common help tips? If so, what and why do you prefer the style? Well, I guess that one thing, just jumping in with a campaign, might be. I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Lloyd?
I think that I have lots of things in my style that go against the common sense of meme. Like the regular game style, I don't spend a lot of time on descriptions, and that is heavily encouraged, I think, by lots of people. I don't really spend any time on it. I also care little for the lives of my player characters. I encourage situations in which they have to suffer. I wouldn't recommend that, like, to begin with. I think, like, I've come to that after, like, years, you know? I think that you should start with the intent of having fun, and the intent of everyone at the table having fun, while keeping it a game, you know, to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, I should learn that lesson because, like, I still find myself becoming invested in player characters because I'm like, oh, you know, we've been helping tell their story for a little while, like, and it makes me terrified. But, like, in a way, I like the feeling of terror when I realize, oh my god, one of you's only on like 4 HP or something, and the fight isn't over yet or something. I'll tell you what, Lloyd, that bit. And I'm so sorry to keep mentioning Lawkeepers, but it's just one of the examples that I have at the top of my head that people might know. But there's a moment in one of the Underdark two-parter that we were doing where both Barker and Chad's character got taken out simultaneously by 2 mind flayers, leaving Lloyd's character in a weakened state without most of his smites, alone against 2 mind flayers. And I was like, "Oh my god, this is it!" And I thought, "This is it. This is the end." You know what I mean? And it was all in the die rolls, and I was terrified. But I suppose, in the sense, like, I was terrified because I cared. So is that better? Is that, I don't know, like
I still feel like I wouldn't call it fear, but I definitely feel like excitement. You know, when things get like that, and like I think that's why I enjoy it so much, because the stakes are real, and I know that I'm not going to pull punches, and you know, so it's more exciting to me rather than like thinking, okay, well, they're probably going to win this fight. I think they might all die, you know, every time there's a fight, which makes it more exciting.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. I don't know if we answered that question very well with our tips. Forge your own way.
Yep.
Was the general theme of this topic anyway. Do it yourself.
Figure
it out. Enemy names are 10 out of 10. I'm super happy that I've picked that up. That's Jeff. Tommy Dude, hey man. He says, question. I touched on this last stream, but how would you go about adding details to a post-apocalyptic world where the apocalypse was maybe 100 years ago? Environmental details, I mean.
Depends on what the apocalypse was. If it was like a nuclear fallout sort of situation, then you can expect everything to be brown. But if it was something else, like a virus, then you would expect everything to be green. Like if there was huge environmental damage that caused the end of the world, then it would obviously shape the way things look. But if people just went extinct or something like that, or if there was a war or something, and then you would expect all cities to be covered in greenery within 5 years, never mind 100. So yeah, I would say got to think about what the actual apocalypse was.
I can't top that, to be honest. The only thing that I can add is that, you know, maybe the players don't know what the apocalypse was. If it was 100 years ago, people don't know what happened, so you can really play with that. Like, apparently, maybe there's nothing wrong with the world whatsoever, other than nature growing back over again. Everything's healthy, everything's fine, but most of the population mysteriously just vanished or died. You know, you can really play with that. Chalice and Chains, Sam DeMcCurry, I believe that is, says, Rob is being a DM mentor right now. No, I'm not, Sam. In fact, we'll end on this because that was the last question. But yeah, as I was saying before about the DM mentor thing, poor choice of words. I think that's all really. I think you don't need them. You can work this out yourself just by playing games and having a good time and talking to your friends. There is no hierarchy. No one knows better than you. No one knows worse than you. There are just different ways of approaching these things. And don't accept people thinking that they can teach you something if you feel happy in the way that you're running your games as you are.
Yep.
That's all I will say.
I make lots of sweeping statements about how I run my game, and I tell you that your game is wrong for not doing it that way. But obviously, I think that because I think my game is the best game. But like, feel ultimately free to ignore anything that we say because we're not you and you're not us. You know.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. Yeah, that's all there is to it. So if there are DM mentors, then bloody Patronus those bitches. Mum's a Nerd Taylor says the biggest thing I've learned from playing with more experienced DM is to roll with the punches and make stuff up. Absolutely. Sam says I feel like we have different ideas of what a mentor is. Maybe we do, but regardless, I don't think they're required for this role-playing game. I think a mentor is required if you're going to be sort of developing a career, or
Be a Jedi.
You're a Jedi. If you're going to become a Jedi Knight, for example, that's very important. If you're thinking about becoming a Jedi, then please do seek out a mentor. Don't try and do that stuff on your own.
Very dangerous.
It's a dangerous path to walk. Very dangerous path to walk. So don't do seek help if that is your inclination. Jeff says, yep, find your own way, find out what you like to do, and that. So I think we've made our position very clear on this matter. And I've really enjoyed doing this as well, Lloyd. That was good fun. And I hope that we helped. But like we were saying before, if you don't agree with us, do it your own way. That's the best way to do it. It is the only way to do it, in my humble opinion. So thank you so much for dropping by. If you like this video, give it a like. If you'd like to see more like it, then give me a subscribe or not. We're all friends here, or are we? Maybe. Let's see. We'll see.
Who knows?
I'm friends. Wait. Thanks for watching. Say bye, Lloyd.
Bye, Lloyd.
I hope that all of your performances are up to standard. Stop the broadcast.